So this is going to be a short history because today we're talking about a piece of music, and it's only about 30 seconds long. So there's only so much we can say about that, I think. But actually, in fact, you just heard a part of it in the intro theme for our show, which is expertly crafted by our very own resident music guy, Josh. Well done, Josh.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'm talking about the Krakow Hejnał, of course. If you don't know, that's the name of a tune played 4 times every hour, on the hour, around the clock by a trumpet player, a real live person from near the top of the taller of the 2 towers of St. Mary's Church in Krakow's main square. Part myth, part legend, maybe a little bit of fact mixed in. The Hejnał is part of the magical atmosphere here in our city and a standard mandatory part of any touristy experience. Okay, so here's a story that's told thousands of times every day to visitors to Krakow and little kids all over the country. Back in the 13th century, 1241 to be exact, during a raid on the city by Mongol invaders, a trumpet player up in the tower saw the Mongol army approaching, and he started playing the trumpet to alert the army and raise the city defenses. Well, towards the end of the tune, he was struck in the throat and killed by a Mongol arrow, and that is why, even today, the tune stops right in the middle of a note at the end.
And he did not save the day.
He did not. Total fail. And right in the middle of the note to mark the time when that poor man all those years ago was killed in the middle of trying, but as Dave says, failing to save the city.
I've always found this a particularly Polish tale, this one.
But the
There's
tragic...
something classically Polish about this.
Like a valiant effort that didn't work out.
The celebration of this dude getting shot in the throat just before the city was burnt down. I've never really got it.
Well, it's a great story, but the evidence
A lucky
suggests...
escape, you might say, actually.
The evidence suggests that that's all it is. It's just a good story. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But before we go deeper into this local legend, I think it's interesting to note that the practice or the idea of having someone up in a tower, usually a church tower, with a trumpet or some similar instrument was common in many European cities. The purpose of this, usually twice a day, was to tell everyone that the city gates were being closed at night and opened at dawn. In fact, and here's where it gets deep, the word Hejnał is the Hungarian word for dawn, as in when the sun comes up in the morning, right? So no idea why the Hungarian word was applied to the same practice all over Europe. If you know, you're welcome to get in touch and educate us on this subject. But the exact origins of the practice here in Krakow are unknown, but the first mention of it was made towards the end of the 14th century. The city government documents from that time. And by the way, isn't it amazing that we have city government documents from the end of the 14th century?
Wow. Bureaucracy is forever.
That's true.
You better fill out those forms because they're going to be there long after you're dead.
So the city government documents from that time indicate that some money was regularly paid to a trumpet player in the tower of St. Mary's Church. No details other than that. And then...
paid him to shut up.
Yeah, actually, possible. We don't know. Maybe you're right. But then almost 300 years later, in 1629, more city records documented the first trumpeter known by name. His name was Ivan Mikulski, 1629. Right, so let's go back to the legend of the Mongolian arrow, right? So I just said a second ago that the first mention of the trumpet player was towards the end of the 14th century. And that's about 150 years after the Mongol invasion. So there's our first clue that maybe there's some kind of imagination involved here, right?
Polish dude told me once that the real story was that actually the dude would start the tune and it was like a signal, and when the gate was actually closed, he just stopped. That's where the whole interrupted trumpet thing came. I was really drunk. I didn't have time to ask him where he
I heard something along the same lines, but actually that they would play the melody, and then as the gate was being opened or closed, they would play the rest of the melody to signal that they got in the message, and they're doing the motion with the gate, either opening or closing.
That may have well been what I was told, actually, and I just messed it up. Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys can do to trample all over?
Oh, what? The Wikipedia entry? Sorry,
No.
Sorry, John.
I'm not reading Wikipedia. No.
The months of research you did in dusty cellars and...
Please continue. I just wanted to say that.
No. You, why don't you guys go ahead and finish for me? And
we didn't do any research. Just someone told me that once. And someone told Mike as well, so blame him.
Any other spoilers you want to insert before I pointlessly continue with what I put together?
You don't think?
All right, John, go ahead.
We'll
mess with it after you're done.
I'm going to return the favor. Something unbelievable. Okay, if there's any air left in this balloon, I'll try to get it back up in the air. Thanks, guys. So where was I? I even forgot where I was. So The first mention is 150 years after the Mongol invasion. So again, it kind of casts doubt on the story immediately.
How long did the Mongol occupation last?
It wasn't really occupation. It was just actually they were here 3 times.
They just went through, burnt it, and then moved on.
Exactly. They literally did that. They just showed up
like stagnates. These
impregnated the local women
demanded
folk.
What do you call it? Tribute. And when they didn't get it, they burned everything. Actually, they probably burned it down no matter what. And they moved on. And then they just I think about 3 years after they came through Krakow, they just mysteriously all went back to Mongolia. I think it was because
it was pretty much as far as they went.
The death of. Is it Genghis Khan?
Genghis Khan.
Was it definitely or his son maybe? Anyway.
One of his 20,000 sons. Yeah.
Let's go back.
I think it's fair to say that period of history is hard to track it exactly. So we're probably nearly right.
Yeah, a lot of legend, a lot of myth, a lot of speculation.
Yeah. There be dragons.
Again, on the subject of the Mongolian thing, do you want to guess, guys? Do you want to guess when the very first recorded mention of any Mongolian connection to the Krakow trumpet player was?
No, I think in the late 19th century.
However, I will say that I read a popular history book about the Mongol invasions, and it was very clear. All of the sources agreed that they were a particular brand of evil. Like, there's no variation in the sources. There's no cities where people going to go, the Mongols showed up and respected religion and built a few churches and everything worked out well. Those stories don't exist.
Okay, do you want to answer the question that I asked instead of going off on your own?
I'm going to guess that. Okay, I'm going to random number 1974. Why not? I'm guessing this is something that's really
that's a little ambitious, but you and Josh are basically on the same distance of the right answer. 1928. 1920. So we're talking about an event from 1241, but the first time it's ever written down anywhere is 1928. Now, do you want to guess where that mention was made?
Oh, I think it was outside of Poland.
It was in America. Do you want to guess the format that it appeared in?
New York Times.
It was a story. It was a children's book. So there's a children's book published in America in 1928 called The Trumpeter of Krakow. This is the first time any recorded, documented mention of the Mongolian Connection appears, right? So I think the case for the factual basis of the Mongolian account of it's not looking good. It's really not looking good.
Buglers are very common, so that's why I brought up the weird theory earlier that the guy told me in the bars. We're trying to get to the bottom of this.
I thought buglery was a felony.
So this American author by the name of
Josh, even for you, that was piss poor. I don't often call you out on your jokes, but
it's been a long week.
American author by the name of Eric Kelly put it in his book, as I said, The Trumpeter of Krakow. And it seems that the legend of the Mongolian connection was then imported back into Poland via that book. How weird is that, right? Again, no known earlier record mentioning any connection to.
It's like the way Coca-Cola invented Santa Claus, John. That
could be, actually. Could be. Anyway,
you enjoyed that interruption.
The first time the Mongolian account of the Mongolian version of the story appears in any Polish publication was in 1935 in a tourist guide for tourists, I guess you could say, 1935. So again, remarkable that if the Mongol story had any basis in fact, or was the part of any local legend, nobody bothered writing it down before 1935. Or maybe it's a fairy tale.
What did this book say? Visit Krakow before the Germans do.
I have to say, I have done a good bit of research because you've far exceeded the Wikipedia entry now. But congratulations, well done.
How many times are you going to mention Wikipedia?
I just was seeing what you do here, and I'm reading the Wikipedia page, and at the start I unfairly threw aspersions on you, and I'm apologising for them now because you've clearly done a lot of homework here. So, I'm very impressed, and I'm very interested, and please continue.
I would love to if that's been my problem since we started recording this.
You're so sarcastic.
No, really.
A much more believable theory about why the tune ends the way that it does, as two people have already alluded to previously in the show, has to do with the fact that it was probably, again, this is a theory, nobody's sure, but this is a theory, but it makes sense, that it was part of like a coordinated routine between the trumpet player in St. Mary's Church and trumpet players stationed at the 4 main city gates that existed at the time. So, in other words, St. Mary's trumpet player would start, and when he ended, that was the cue for the trumpet player at these 4 satellite gates to start playing the same tune back to signal that they had either opened or closed the gate. Of course, those 4 gates, of course, the Florianska gate we still have today, a gate that was at the end of Shevska, opposite Bagatella, a gate at the bottom of Grodska Street, and a gate at the end of Siena, across the street from the the main post office.
See, I must apologise because now I realise why you were pissed off when I mentioned that earlier. You were getting to that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Well, I'm just saying,
But for you and Mike, who just wanted to run in like rhinos and just trample all over it.
In my defence, I didn't see any notes for this episode, John. I didn't know you were going to do that. You've done so much research.
But the implied understanding is to shut the hell up until I finish.
We're just supposed to listen to John in reverential silence.
Something
like all our podcast listeners.
Something like that. All right, let's finally leave.
Like that was ever going to happen.
Let's finally leave the Mongolian story behind us. Move on to the present day, almost the present day. The modern practice of playing the Hejnał every day started in 1838, and the tune was played just once a day at noon. Starting in 1927, it was broadcast on Polish radio all over the country, again, just once a day at 12 p.m. Still continues today, by the way, on Radio 1. Today, the tune is played every hour on the hour, 24/7, as we all know, but this is where I have to admit that I was unable to find the one piece of information I was really looking for, which is when they started to play the Hejnał around the clock 24/7 instead of just once a day at noon. So if anybody listening has any information on this,
that
let me know.
It's after the Second World War. But,
really? After the war?
Yeah.
Okay. I looked in a lot of places, couldn't find anything about that.
It's definitely post 2008 because I lived around the Pocztagówna for a few years, and let me tell you, you can hear it there every hour on the hour.
You mean pre?
At least pre. Yeah.
It was a joke. I meant that I used to live within earshot of the Hejnał, and it's really
the worst joke ever.
Annoying. Okay. I'm sorry.
I don't know, because you mentioned they used to play it at noon, and that started in 1838, right? I think that was the number.
1838, yeah.
Yeah, and apparently it was astronomically proper noon that they had the
exactly. They got a notification from the astronomical clock people or something. Like super precise. Yes.
And Krakow was the first city in like Poland, or what would have been Poland. Poland existed then completely, to have like an official way to say what the time is exactly.
There were clocks, obviously, but they weren't like official. But the Krakow Trumpet Player was the official time.
Allegedly, the clock on the clock tower in the market square is kind of correct to a billionth of a second, and is kind of controlled from Geneva or something like that.
Well, the guys who work up there in the tower today, and they're all guys, by the way, they're technically firemen, and they're employed by the fire department.
Really?
One guy who works there today, his name is Jan Koltong. He's a third-generation Krakow trumpet player. His dad worked there for 33 years, his grandfather for 35. Now,
should have got Dave to read that out.
Apparently,
that was a good one.
Apparently, they work in 12-hour shifts. I've seen conflicting information about this: 12-hour shifts or 8-hour shifts.
33 hours straight.
This is where there's an interesting story that I can remember from my time here. This is just after Poland joined the European Union, 2005 or 2006. This story showed up. And until that time, and I'm sure of this, the firemen up there, they worked in 24-hour shifts, like one day on, let's say 2 days off or whatever, right? But this was a violation of European Union workplace safety rules. Working 24 hours straight.
Here it comes. Back off, Brussels. The gig economy.
And so Brussels steps in and says, you can't do this. It's a violation of workplace safety.
Surge pricing.
And the firemen said, well, this is what we want. We like to do it this way. We've arranged it for ourselves this way. We're okay. We're fine. And besides, for 55 minutes, we're just sitting on a couch watching TV. So
yes, your traditions and customs mean nothing to us.
It's okay in Brussels. And so you have this absurd, ridiculous situation of big, enormous European Union telling 5 guys in the tower of St. Mary's Church, you can't do this for your own good. And the guys are like, well, this is what we like. And so finally they had to change, and that's what gives us the situation we have today when they work in possibly 12, possibly 8-hour shifts. I'm not sure. I've
heard 12 because I've heard they've also each one plays it 48 times, so that would add up to 12 times.
Yeah, 96 a day, 24 times 4, right? So yeah. So next time you're walking through the square and you hear the Hejnał, or you think about the Mongolian arrow thing, it's a great story. Great to think about what a hell of a shot that must have been to hit the guy in the throat up in the window. But
did you want to hear
it's probably not true.
Did you want to hear my alternative theory
about what?
Well, about everything to do with the trumpet.
Yes, we do, Josh.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, we would love to hear your theory, John.
I was kind of waiting for you to ask me, a little bit about the musical, technical side of it. The question that didn't seem to be forthcoming.
Well, we're getting there.
Oh, I see. Sorry, because I was looking at the time, and you were saying it was a very short. Then it's
14 minutes already.
Yeah. It is.
Well, okay, it's better than we thought. So, okay, so as a musician, what do you make of the Hejnał tune?
Right. Well, okay, here we go. It's very, very. Thank you. It's very, very straightforward. It's in the key of F. The opening 3 notes are the first, third, and fifth of the scale. It's a standard thing. You can play it actually on a bugle. You don't need a valved trumpet.
But they do play on a valve trumpet.
They do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's easier. Although I don't wish to, kind of cast aspersions that, the trumpet is a difficult instrument to
You
play
saying
well.
these brave firemen take the easy option here, Josh?
Well, I'm just saying.
The purist is would use a boot. What do you call it?
A bugle.
So would you have to be a proper musician to learn how to play this, or do you think you could, as a non-musician, you could manage somehow?
Josh.
I think, playing a brass instrument is a fairly specific skill. You've got to kind of have what they call an embouchure, something that is kind of generally you learn about through a teacher. You could kind of, I guess, learn to play one without knowing how to read music or whatever. But this brings me on to my theory of the my contra theory to the arrow in the throat notion, which I think is laughable, and that is this. That when you write it down in manuscript form on a piece of music, the bit that you hear covers approximately one side of manuscript paper. And my theory is this, that the piece was actually rather longer and went on to a second side, a second piece of paper.
I see where you're going.
And it got lost. And
Blown
now,
away.
And so now they just got to go ba, 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 and stop because that's where the music stops.
Like they didn't want to admit to it. It's like, no, that's the whole thing.
That's a pretty interesting theory. You didn't want to ask Josh about.
I was getting to it. I was getting to it.
Yeah, were you?
I totally was.
What else we got? This is
Okay.
really interesting.
Okay. All right.
Oh, he's hornswoggled.
Oh, you've really knocked him back on his feet there. He doesn't know what to say now.
As I mentioned earlier, you're the author or the creator behind our intro music. What do we have? 3 different themes with the Hejnał, I think.
Yeah, where's our surf rock version, Josh?
There's several more in the pipeline. You see what I did there? Surf rock pipeline.
Dick Dale.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got 4 versions, I think. There's the sort of the Pet Shop Boys type disco polo version. There's the
I like the
twangy,
jazzy one. That's my favourite.
kind of Johnny Cash one. There's the jazzy kind of late night film review one, and then there's the sort of
the guitar.
screaming
That's right,
guitar
4.
one. Yeah,
Okay, so where's the death metal version? That's what I want.
Dubstep. Just throw a trumpet in a washing machine.
All right, so before this gets silly and goes in weird directions, we're going to bring this to a close. Yeah, it's too late now, I guess. That's the short history of the Krakow Hejnał. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hey, don't forget.
I never got to tell my story about him.
When I say don't forget, does that sound like a good time for you to step in with something?
But I used to live around I was the only one that lived within earshot. I thought
You already mentioned this twice.
I used to live within earshot. I used to live with Mick
live within
Weisker.
earshot now.
Who
cares?
than you did?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Are you now you're gonna back out?
Yeah, I'm backing
All
out.
right, Jesus Christ! Don't forget, people. As we mentioned on the news earlier this week, on our main page, KrakCast.pl, we now have a PayPal donate button. So yes, we are asking you to throw a couple of coins in our virtual cup if you feel like it.
Yeah.
Beer ain't cheap.
If you've ever palmed one of our opinions off as your own down the pub, you know what to do.
And you probably have. Let's be honest. Absolutely.
Come on, pay the man.
KrakCast.pl, on the right-hand side, you'll see it, the donate button, and so we appreciate it. So think about making a recurring donation. Again, just a few zlotys a month, whatever you can manage.
The KrakCast only recommends you palm off Mikey's opinions.
Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time on the KrakCast.